Set up here. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for allowing me to be here. I know this is a highly complex topic, and I understand some of the history that's happened with folks in this conference over the last year to 2 years, and so it's with sensitivity that we talk about this topic today, and then even the second one, which is the dealing with catastrophic injury or death of a student athlete. And so regrettably, I have a little bit too much experience in this in my 30 plus years of experience as an athletic trainer and as an athletic director. And so today we'll try to give you some tools to equip you with some pieces of conversation and to identify some resources that are available for use on your campus. So again, thanks for allowing me to be here today. My job with the NAIA is the Director of Student Athlete Health and Wellness, and so I really oversee all of our student character development, all of the policies and procedures with athletic trainers, rules and regulations related to player safety, and I work with the Association of Student Athletes and the Council for Student Athletes, which are our governing bodies for the NAIA and giving the student athlete the voice in the profession. And so much of the content that you'll see in this first presentation is a direct result of input from the student athletes on what it is that's going on in their minds. We'll back it up with some statistics and we'll move it from there. And so the other thing is we're going to make a little veer from the agenda this morning. I've got about 2 hours of presentation, so we'll go through this first one, we'll take a real quick break, and then we'll go right into the second one. And so if you'll bear with me, we'll try to get through some pretty complex stuff in a relatively quick time. So as we start out, I want to just ask some thought-provoking questions. I want you to think about these questions. So with the title of the talk, I can speak English this morning, is Student Athletes and Mental Health, what's going on in their minds. So what's the issue? You know, is this a big issue today in our society? How big is the problem? What are your thoughts on this? Is it worse today than ever before? Again, go back. How big is the problem? What's the issue? Is it a big problem? And I by the way I teach or the way I lecture is I like crowd participation. So these are thought-provoking questions. But now that you've had a few seconds to think about it, what's the issue? Is this a big issue that you folks are facing today as athletic directors, as coaches, and administrators? Let's see a show of hands. This is a big issue today. Yeah. Okay. Is it worse today than ever before?
It's more open today than it's ever been before.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing as we look at, as I look back on my career. I don't think we ever had these conversations when I was a kid growing up. I don't think we ever really talked about it. Doesn't mean that it wasn't there. And so sometimes by talking about it, it popularizes it, and consequently it becomes a bigger issue than it really is. And I'm not minimizing that. I hope that didn't come across as to say that it's not a problem. I'm not sure it's worse today than ever before. I would say that it's different today than ever before. Why should we be concerned? Well, again, that's kind of a flippant, arrogant, idiotic question to ask a group of athletics administrators. We better be concerned, and if we're not, we're in the wrong business. Again, it's all about our student athletes and what they bring to us at our institutions and what it is that we are in the business of, and that's developing the character of these student athletes and allowing them to have the opportunity to experience what it means to be a student athlete. I would say the one thing that I've noticed on this question is the problem is worse today than ever before. I get a different response when often I do this talk with a group of student athletes and athletic directors and coaches in the same room. And it's really interesting to see the dynamic when you look at the generational differences. I feel like, when I speak with folks of my generation, we kind of scratch our head and go, God, these kids have never had it this good. What's going on to them? How come they, all of these kinds of emotional things. And kids go, I'm so overwhelmed, I can't, and it's a very interesting dynamic and response when we look at it through a generational lens. And again, that's one of my research areas is understanding the differences in the generations and how we view things around the world in our society. So what can we do? How many of you feel like on your campuses you have a pretty good approach to dealing with the mental health issues of your student athletes? And again, it might be a little embarrassing. I see a couple show of hands, that's great. A few more over here, that's great. Again, I appreciate the honesty there. As I looked around the room, I saw very few hands, and most of us struggle with this. And I think one of the things that we struggle with is that in coaching and in athletics, we try to identify a quick solution or an easy solution to a highly complex problem. One of the things that came up in the NAIA over the last couple of years that I've been working with them is the student athletes say they need a day of rest. And so they've been wanting to implement a mandatory day off of all athletically related activities. No coaching, no weight room, no video, 1 day a week is all they're asking. They think that's pretty fair and reasonable to do. The NCAA has been doing it for a long time. Well, at least that's what their rules say, they've been doing it for a long time. And the coaches really, and the athletic directors really pushed back on this concept. They said, we don't need you to tell us how to govern our programs. The NAIA is very proud of institutional autonomy and allowing athletic directors to do their jobs and to do them well. And there was a sense that, we shouldn't be legislating or mandating from an organizational level that kids have to have a day off. That's up to the institutions as we look at what's going on with our kids. So much of what's influenced this discussion really originated from the students as they've driven this piece of legislation, and as they drove it, they hit a brick wall when it came to the athletic directors. So my objectives today are simply to start a dialogue. Again, we'll have some conversation as we move through things a little bit here. We're going to take some time to identify institutional resources. As I look around the tables, and as I heard some of you, I see at many of your tables you're with your own colleagues. As we get into some discussion later on, I'm going to ask you to move around and to move with folks that aren't your colleagues. I think we can learn a lot from each other, and I think that makes us a little bit vulnerable, and something that we generally don't like to do as coaches and athletic directors and athletic trainers. But I think there's wisdom in learning from each other. And then, again, more than anything, is to develop a little bit more of an understanding of how complex this really is. There is no easy solution. And it isn't give them a day off and their mental health issues will go away. And that's what the students want, is we want a day off. We want to be able to rest. We need that for recovery. And my coaches and ADs go, Russ, it's not that simple. And I am in full and complete agreement. There's much more to it than that. So here's some statistics. This frightens me. 1 in 5 people report a mental illness, so 20% of our population. 18 to 25-year-olds have the highest incidence of mental illness in the United States. What's the age group of your student athletes? 18 to 25 years old. We may have a few anomalies or outliers on the high end of it. The thing that makes it even more frightening is this group of this population in this age group have the lowest treatment rate. In other words, the highest incidence of mental illness, but they seek help at a rate lower than any other age group in our society. And yet, how many of you on your campuses have a counselor or have added a second counselor or a third counselor over the last couple of years? Why? Because of the mental health issues, right? So it's available, but the student athletes and the students in general, I'm speaking broad brush here, generally are not using it. And all of my statistics are evidence-based. Again, I'm not going to throw numbers at you that I can't back. This study is from the National Institute of Health. It's current 2017. It's an amazing study that shows what's going on our campuses. Mental health in college students, 1 in 4, it's a diagnosable disease. So again, it was 1 in 5 of the general population. It's 25% of the student athlete population. It's diagnosable. 40% of our student athletes do not seek help. We're seeing evidence of that. Again, as we look in the Northwest at the losses we've sustained in the last couple of years of student athletes. Again, I'm from Montana. We just lost a kid 2 weeks ago to suicide. That no clue. There were none of the indicators, and so.
I just want to ask, is this PowerPoint going to be available to us?
You betcha.
I just wonder how many notes I
Yeah,
can take.
this is I'll give you the punchline here at the end. This is all available on our website, this entire talk, along with all of the talking points. So I'll direct you there. So again, take as many notes as you want, but it's yours. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on.
We'll also be posting this video on YouTube on our channel, so.
Again, 40% don't seek help, 80% feel overwhelmed. Does that sound like your student athletes? Coach, I'm overwhelmed, or they may skip the coach and come to you as the athletic director and go, coach is killing me, he doesn't understand, I've got a life, I've got this and that and everything else. 50% of our student athletes report academic difficulties as the direct result of anxiety. That was frightening when I saw that. What are our 5 most common mental illnesses or mental health issues in collegiate student athletes? What do you think they are? Shout them out for the crowd. Give me one.
Anxiety.
Depression, anxiety. Fatigue. Wow. You guys are shy today. Quiet. Here they are in order. Number 1 reported mental health issue in collegiate student athletes, depression. Most common thing our student athletes are reporting. Actually, let me correct that. This is in college students generally. We'll bring it to student athletes here in a few minutes. Anxiety, suicide, and when we talk about suicide, we're talking about suicidal thoughts or ideology, not necessarily, again, the stupid way to say it is successful suicide. It's a silly way that they talk about it, but disordered eating and addiction. And what I find interesting is addiction, although it's the 5th most common of the mental health issues in college students, has a direct relationship and correlation to depression, anxiety, suicide, and disordered eating. And see that as the precursor to many of these other things. And again, this is from the National College Health Association. This is a study that is done every 3 years at colleges and universities, and I believe the junior college or community college system is involved in this. And it's done, you can do comparative analysis from peer institutions to same level institutions to privates to publics, everything. It's an absolutely amazing process. So student athletes and wellness, this survey. Let's see, where am I at? 24% of our student athletes suffer from clinical depression. 30% feel overwhelmed, reporting not enough energy for other activities, so they focus on their athletics and not much else, or their athletics and their academics, and that's all there is. There is nothing beyond that. 25% report being exhausted by the mental, not the physical, but the mental demands of their sport. Again, this is part of the NCAA Wellness Survey where they've taken a look at this as to what's happening amongst their student athletes. So this, as I go back, as I go ahead and we're going to do a little change here we're having some technology issues this morning. We could spend a full day talking about depression and about anxiety and about suicide, disordered eating, and addiction. These are highly complex. Some of the statistics, 36% report depression of our student athletes. It is the #1 cited reason for college dropouts. Anxiety, this is different than an anxiety disorder. And if you want to understand the difference, Steve Nash, NBA, has done a really nice video on this. He suffers from anxiety disorder. I'm feeling a little anxiety as I come to the podium today, and I don't know most of you, and it's an audience that I'm quite unfamiliar with, and so I'm nervous, I'm a little anxious. That's not anxiety disorder. Anxiety disorder is crippling. It is absolutely this overwhelming, debilitating, just completely incapacitating feeling or emotion that comes upon you in a very quick way. Most people that suffer from anxiety disorder have their first episode prior to the age of 22. So again, what age group are we talking about? 18 to 25? Do they experience anxiety disorder with their first episode prior to age 25? Suicide, again, we talk about a second leading cause of death amongst college students. That's a frightening statistic. We'll talk more about recognition of suicide and some of the things. Disordered eating, there's anorexia, there's bulimia. There's a newer one out called anabulimia, which is a combination of both, and it's really interesting. Statistically, we used to think of disordered eating as a women's problem, a female student-athlete problem, more common in women, and now we're finding statistically that it is identical between men and women. Very little difference between the two groups, especially amongst student-athletes. Wrestlers are clinically diagnosed as bulimic during the course of their season. How interesting is that? How many of you have wrestling at your schools? I'm not sure how big that is. The Northwest is a big center for wrestling. They're diagnosable as disordered. And the minute their season's over, that clinical diagnosis goes away. Pretty interesting. Again, what we see with disordered eating is we see its perceptions. One of the things that we ask in counseling is, what do you see when you look at yourself in the mirror? And the student athlete or the patient with a disordered eating perspective doesn't see who they really are. They see themselves as this fat blob, as this image or this perception. It's all about perceptions, or an altered level of healthy perception. The scary thing about disordered eating, it has the highest mortality rate of all mental disorders. Let me say that another way. More people die from eating disorders than any other mental illness. Probably hadn't realized that. Highest mortality rate. Addiction, alcohol and drug use, pretty common on all of our campuses. Oh, wait a minute. Drinking age isn't 21. How can it be? Most of our students are 18, 19, 20, and yet it's a very common problem. Social, societal norms tell us it's okay. It's always been that way. We've always done that. That's common. 25% of drinkers report academic problems as a result of their drinking. 60% of college students have consumed excessive amounts of alcohol within the last 30 days. 60% within the last 30 days. 66% of this group have engaged in binge drinking during that same time period. Binge drinking for men in this age group is 5 drinks or more over a 2-hour period. For women is 4 drinks or more. 20% of all college students meet the alcohol disorder criteria. What? 1 in 5? When we put this tool that is a diagnostic tool that help us to make a clinical decision on whether you're alcoholic or not, 1 in 5 meet the alcoholism criteria. 21% of college students report illicit drug use, and interestingly enough, that percentage is higher among student athletes than non-student athletes. And pot. I don't even know where to go with pot. It's legal, it must be safe, but I don't know how even to respond to this anymore. Are we testing for it? Are we not testing for it? Is it a performance enhancer? Is it not? It's really interesting to see. So as you think about the statistics and you think about kind of the where we started off with a few questions, we're going to watch a TED Talk video. And the reason we're doing this was sent to us by one of my student athletes in the NAIA. And they said, Russ, people don't understand what it is to be a student athlete with a mental health issue. And she says, I think you will find this to be a really helpful tool. So Tracy, thanks. We'll go ahead and watch this. It takes about 20 minutes, so sit back and enjoy. If you need a cup of coffee, that's all right. It's pretty powerful.
You have to be at a team lift at 6 a.m., but you're accidentally 1 minute late because you slept through your alarm. Your heart's pounding from sprinting to the gym, but nobody cares that it's because you were up until 2 a.m. studying for an exam that you still don't feel prepared for. You can feel the tension between you and your teammates who now have to run sprints tomorrow at 6 a.m. because you were 1 minute late. You start the lift, and your mind's just not in the right place, but it doesn't matter. You have to lift. And as soon as it's over, you scarf down breakfast on your way to 8 a.m. class, and you get there, and your hair's still wet because you didn't have time to dry it. The professor looks at you and says, "Where's the homework assignment?" But you forgot it. How could you forget it? You were supposed to be on top of everything, so you sit there and you worry about what else you might have forgot. And at noon, you get a 30-minute break. But it's not really a break because you use it to quickly make up an assignment you missed for last week's game. And soon, it's 12:10. And to you, 40 minutes does not feel like enough time to get on the court and be ready, even though it actually is. So you head over, and at 1, practice is starting. And you have to forget everything that happened in your day, because at practice, you have to perform. You can't not perform. There's someone better than you, someone competing with you, and someone in high school who just committed to be you. So forget the 0 on your assignment. Forget the test you're not prepared for. Forget the friends you haven't seen in weeks. Forget the argument you've been in with your parent. Play well, pass well, perform. And when it's finally over, you find yourself staring in the locker room mirror, trying not to cry. And you ask yourself, is this how I'm supposed to feel? My name is Victoria Garrick, and I play volleyball here at USC. I've been playing sports my whole life, but never quite like this. Now in high school, I didn't understand mental illness. And usually when people say mental illness, people tense up because talking about it is uncomfortable. You might think, oh, I've heard this before, or this doesn't affect me. Those are common thoughts to have, I know, because I used to think the same things. I thought, depression means you have serious family issues, or, you're born with anxiety. I just didn't get it because it's hard to understand something you can't see or touch. So when I got to college and began my career as a Division I athlete, I never thought I would struggle with these issues. Now, I can't be the only athlete here. We definitely probably have some soul cyclers, some neighborhood joggers. So if you've ever, had an injury, torn a ligament, sprained an ankle, I just want you to raise your hand. All right, awesome. That's like most of the room. It's pretty common. Now I want you to raise your hand if you've ever had depression or anxiety. You can put your hands down. Did you feel almost that tension or like that awkwardness we just created together? Did you maybe judge someone who raised their hand, or were you afraid to raise your own hand because of what people might think? 1 in 4 people suffer from a mental health issue, which is 25% of this room right now. What we just experienced together was a room full of people stigmatizing mental health. Dr. Jeffrey Lieberman defines stigma as dishonor or disgrace. He says it's like the scarlet A that Hester Prynne is forced to wear, or the mark on Cain in the Bible. It's this label that outcasts you from everyone else. We stigmatize mental health in this same way, and that's a societal issue that needs to change. And while anyone can experience a mental health issue, today I'm going to talk about mental health, specifically in athletes, because I have faced anxiety and depression through my experiences as an athlete. So let me tell you a little bit about me. When I first got to the USC volleyball team, I was overjoyed. Let me preface this by saying I was not a top recruit, okay? I was not called by tons of Division I schools, but USC was my dream scenario, and I wanted it so bad. And I knew I was good enough despite what anyone else told me. So I emailed these coaches every day. I called them every week. I went in for extra reps in high school. I sent them videos. I called again until they were like, okay, you can log on. Just stop contacting us. So eventually I got my spot. But still, these USC coaches did not think I would play 1 point. But I had this fire, this zest for competition, and I didn't care that I didn't have the accolades that the other girls did. So I kept working hard. Against all odds, my freshman season, I started and played in every single Pac-12 match, and we won the championship. That's me on the left right there. And what happened was there was this girl who wasn't supposed to do anything, who now has a role on what at the time was the #1 team in the nation. Mentally, I started on this high, right, because I was living my dream. But all of a sudden, I began to feel differently. I became anxious, more anxious than I'd ever felt before. But I never even used the 5 alarms because I woke up at 7:15 anyways due to my anxiety over being late. And I worried about my athletic performance constantly. On game days, I worried, what if I don't play well tonight? What if the coaches bench me? What if my passing sucks? What if I didn't study the scout enough? There were times I would feel this knot in my stomach and my skin start to crawl and my hands start to shake and eyes go with tears because I was so afraid to play and make a mistake. Because at an elite level, mistakes are costly. And on top of it, I had school and exams and family and a social life, and I couldn't handle everything coming at me so fast and just piling up at one time. I want to take a second, though, to show you guys how this happened to me because, to be ironic, it is easier to understand something when you can see it. So, we're going to look at a typical week in my life. I'm going to, disclaimer, this wasn't intended to be funny, but as I wrote my talk, I realized how much of a joke my schedule is, so I had some fun with it. So if you like to make light of a tragic situation like me, you're going to enjoy this. If not, bear with me. I have 16 units of class. Let's add a nice fat 5-hour practice block. Then I have required tutoring. Maybe time to eat because I'm a human who does that sometimes. Also, I need office hours, probably with a professor who thinks his class is the only thing I have to do in my life. Then I have an exam, which I probably only know 20% of, so I'm gonna block out time to study and really master that 20%, on top of all my other homework. And oops, maybe I have 6 a.m. running because my teammate's going through the same stuff I am and she was late one day. But don't forget, games on Friday and Sunday out of state. So now I'm missing these days of class for travel. Secretly, I'm kind of excited I'm missing class, but the logical part of me is like, when am I going to find the time to make up that work? Because pregame warm-up starts not 1, not 2, not 3, but a whopping 4 hours before the game. So if you thought I'd have time to make it up, I actually don't. And then it all restarts when I hop off my plane bright and early to do it all again. And in the little time I have left, I like to cry in misery. I wish I was kidding. But if you look at the schedule in all seriousness, you can see how this can overpower anyone. It can overpower one of you. All of a sudden, I was thinking about what I have to do next, what I can't be late for, what I can't miss, what could go wrong. And it just kind of drove me off the wall. And because I didn't think I could have any of these illnesses because I was an athlete, I battled depression for half a year without even knowing I was. When I first became really unhappy, it was in August, and I didn't know how to describe it. Every morning I woke up, I immediately despised the day. I didn't have the energy, I didn't want to go anywhere, I didn't want to see anyone or do anything. At practice, I just went through the motions. I woke up, I went to the practice block for 5 hours, and I went to sleep. And I did that again and again and again. I was just depleted, completely and utterly drained. And do you know how much energy it takes day in and day out to not even succeed, but just get by as a student athlete? It's exhausting. And I told myself, you can't feel this way, Victoria. You have nothing to feel sad about. You're starting, you have a great family, you have good friends. And I was confused because I was known to always be the most energetic, the most bubbly and talkative, and always happy. So I said, put on this face and just fake it. But after a while, I couldn't fake it. I began to see a psychologist once a week, and that was weird. Being honest, the first time I walked into the waiting room, I was like, oh my God, I'm one of those people now, like, I have a therapist. You imagine, like, there goes that voice stigmatizing mental health, like, therapies for weirdos. I thought I'd, like, walk in and there'd be, like, this big yellow couch and, like, this box of tissues, and they'd say, like, tell me your darkest secrets. But, like, it's not like that. It was actually very helpful. So, after a while of seeing her, she suggested I try medicine, antidepressants. And I was immediately like, what? It's like when you've been dating someone for a while and they say, I want you to meet my parents. And you're like, this is too serious now. So naturally, I refused the meds. But of course, my depression worsened. I realized it wasn't something I could just eat a tub of ice cream over, cry, and be fine the next day. The neurochemicals in my brain were literally not producing the way they once were, and my serotonin levels were no longer high enough to keep my mood where it once was. What I used to not be able to describe, I could formulate into words. I had this dark cloud over my head, and it followed me everywhere. It was there when I woke up. It was there when I went to sleep. It was there in practice every day, passing balls. And do you know how hard that is when you have to be good at your craft every single day, and all you want to do is lay into a ball and just cry? I remember times during water breaks, I would run to the bathroom and just sob, because for 5 seconds, I wanted my day to stop. I never got to a point of self-harm, fortunately, and I never put myself in actual danger, but I can remember a few times that I was biking and I thought, you know, if this car accidentally hit me, that would stop my week. That would give me the break I so badly need. I want to show you some pictures that I posted during this time in my life. What do we think of these? Just look at them. Here I am with my friends at the party. There we are looking cute and Christmassy. Over to the right, we're celebrating. I look happy, right? Because no one posts what they don't want you to see. This photo on the left, I was at that party for probably 20 minutes before I was so overwhelmed with all the people around me that I snuck out the back and went home alone. And when my friend in the picture texted me and said, "Hey, where'd you go?" I lied, said I ran into someone. The photo in the middle, we took like 50 pictures that night to find one that I deemed pretty enough to post on my Instagram. Completely staged. And the one on the right, I spent that night crying. I was trying so hard to portray this life that I so badly felt I needed to have. And this is a problem with so many people my age, not just because of depression, but because our culture has created this belief that we need to be achieving all the time in order to be happy, right? Look what internship she got. Look what trip he went on. It doesn't stop, this constant scrolling of people who look like they're doing so well, that you sit back and say to yourself, well, what am I doing? What do I look like? Why don't I look like her? It's this flawed notion that says you need to be achieving to be happy and be valued. If I'm on the USC volleyball team, I'll be valued. If I get this job, I'll be happy. At this point, you're probably thinking, why don't you quit? I'm not on scholarship. I could just quit. Why don't I just stop doing that? I don't quit because volleyball is who I am. It's not a hobby or something I do on the side. It's my life, like most athletes. And what that means is I have to learn how to manage my lifestyle, because I have 2 more years left, and you better bet I want to win a championship. I have major depressive disorder, single episode with anxious features. I see my therapist now, I take medicine, I practice positive thinking, I try to be authentic on social media and to people. But the biggest thing that stood with me is I sat back and assessed it all and I thought, why? Why did it take me so long to acknowledge and accept my illness? And I realized the culture that we live in as athletes does not make it easy for us to honor this. If you think about it, the culture of athletics preaches where there's a will, there's a way. The best don't rest. Unless you puke, faint, or die, keep going. Mental illness is associated with weakness. To appear weak is the last thing an athlete wants. And we're always hearing about the grind, right? It's about the grind. Even if you're not an athlete, I mean, you've heard about the grind. To me, it means when you just feel like you can't do something, but you do it. When your thighs are burning and you're sweating bullets, you run one more sprint. When it's the 5th set and you just feel like you can't do it anymore, but you go dig 10 more balls. Like, that's the grind. But being a part of this culture makes it so hard for athletes to differentiate between what is hard work and what is pushing yourself too far. What happens when this push through your workout becomes a push through a conversation, a push through a day, and all of a sudden, a push through your life? I know what the grind is. I've started on this team for 2 years competing with girls who were supposed to blow me out of the gym. And that's why it was so hard for me to honor what I was going through. I was in practice thinking, I don't want to be here today. I just want to go home and rest. And I said, Victoria, The girl to your left, she's here, she's working hard. She must want it more than you. You don't deserve to be here if you're not gonna work hard. I told myself I was weak for wanting a break. And this is so true across all athletes because the stigma makes it so hard for us to come forward. Did you know that Serena Williams and Terry Bradshaw have had depression? Serena Williams, she's a legend, okay? She's been the world's #1 female tennis player 7 different times. And even someone like her can struggle with these issues. But that's just stuff people aren't realizing. Let's look at concussions, for example. In 1933, the NCAA's medical handbook said, concussions shouldn't be regarded too lightly. In 1952, the New England Journal of Medicine said, players who've suffered multiple concussions should stop playing football. Not until 70 years later, in 2009, did the NFL even acknowledge publicly that concussions can have long-lasting effects on players. So we're looking at something here where 20 years ago, nobody cared. Nobody cared about concussions. You'd think, yeah, banging your head together, probably not safe. No. Players were told, tough it out if your head hurts. The way we're treating mental illness today is so similar to the way we treated concussions 20 years ago. Oh, this athlete's feeling depressed? Sleep it off. Oh, that athlete's having an anxiety attack? Tell them to calm down. We need to make a change societally to make people care this much about mental health. Because I'll tell you this, right now, a physical injury is treated more serious than a psychological injury, and that needs to change. I could easily get the day off for a physical injury, right? Because I'm limping. You can see my ankle swelling. But for an athlete to say, I've been feeling depressed this week, or I had insomnia because of my anxiety, you're just looked down upon. And at this level, no one wants to miss practice. I mean, that sets me behind the competition, behind on my team. But when the trainer can see you're injured, they make you sit out because they can see your physical health is at stake. But when no one can see your mental health, it's just up to you to decide. And someone like me who hates not being there, my team will tell you this, I hate not being there when they're sprinting without me and I'm injured, it kills me. So for me to walk up to them and say, I have a completely uninjured body and you can't see it, but I'm not well and I need to rest today, is so hard to do. And with everything I've been through, I've only done that once. I'm here today for population of athletes who thinks they'll be viewed as lesser, doesn't have the courage to come forward, or doesn't know that they can be a strong, competitive, elite athlete and have a mental health issue. In 2015, the NCAA conducted a survey. They found that out of 2,100 athletes, 30% reported they were intractably overwhelmed. On depression and anxiety, they said they've seen a general increase. This is 2 years old. This should be recorded every season, if not every year, and they do not even give us numbers on depression and anxiety, and this is the most recent survey the NCAA has done. It infuriates me that something so serious is being so clearly disregarded. I did my own survey to show you guys that this is an epidemic. I surveyed 100 men and women from Division I schools like Stanford, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, you name it. And this is what I found. When asked if they'd ever experienced symptoms of depression or anxiety, 69% said yes. The statistic I gave you in the beginning was 25. When asked if they think the amount of time they need to spend on their sport is too much, more than half said yes, almost at 90%. And the next one honestly devastated me when the results came in and it kept me up for a few days. I asked them, have you ever felt you experienced anxiety, depression, or an eating disorder, but were too afraid to tell anyone? More than half. That means those athletes today are somewhere and no one knows that they're struggling. And about 80% agree with me that this topic is neglected throughout society. My university gives me free medicine and free therapy, and for that I am so grateful. But so many other athletes like me don't get that opportunity because this issue is underrated and they don't have the funds. Due to the extreme time demands and the pressure that we athletes feel, we need to just be very aware of how athletes are feeling across the country and consistently be evaluating them. And athletes need to be aware of their mental health so that they can learn how to manage this lifestyle. I love my team. They are special girls, and I love the sport of volleyball. That's why I can't let it go. But as I continue my next 2 years, I hope that I hear this conversation get louder. I hope mental health stops being stigmatized for all people. And I hope that one day, a person like me can get on this stage, ask a question about mental health, and no one will think twice about raising their hand. Thank you.
So, as we think about what we just saw in the YouTube video, again, working at, having worked at NCAA Division I and NCAA Division III and NAIA, I've had 5 years at a community college in Central California. I've seen athletics at pretty much every level. Do you have student athletes that you recognize that look a little bit like Victoria Garrett? The experiences, the story, the reality of her life. How many of you can remember or see or associate somebody that you've worked with over the course of your career that's similar to this, right? Yeah. So again, the affirmation, most of the hands in the audience went up. I think as we listen to her story, and regardless of what level it is that we are at, we can see certain tendencies that are common across all levels, whether it's high school, whether it's small college, whether it's major Division I. We see some of the same attributes and same difficulties, the same concerns across all levels. So the way that this presentation goes now is there's a series of a number of dialogue questions that we're supposed to break up and go into small groups and visit about. Out of recognition for time and the importance of the next topic, I'm going to just go over these questions with you. Again, the intention with this presentation is to equip you. I just received an email when I got here yesterday from a university that used this presentation with 350 student athletes. It's a university that does between 8 to 10 training sessions a year for their student athletes on all kinds of issues related to their development and in character and in performance and nutrition and safety and things like that. And the athletic director that sent this email to me yesterday said, in 5 years of doing this, they've never seen a dialogue from student athletes as engaged as this presentation. And then what they did is they broke 350 student athletes up by teams and they gave them these next guiding questions. And this has been ongoing for 6 weeks, and the dialogue is continuing at this university. That's pretty cool. One tool, and again, this tool is for you. This is on NAIA.org. Click on student athletes, click on current student athletes, and you'll go to our Wellness Resource Center. And you'll find this in the left-hand column. I've got a visual image of where it is. And it's called Mental Health, What's Going On in Their Minds, PowerPoint, and all of the talking points that go along with it. And so this is available for you to download, for you to use with your student athletes in any way that you feel appropriate. What we're seeing nationally in our 250 NAIA member institutions is this thing is getting lots of hits. It just keeps getting downloaded and used and used and used. And so it's starting the dialogue. It's not giving all the answers. And again, I think if you heard me at the start, there are no easy answers. This is highly complex, and there's no one solution. But it starts when we have open dialogue, when we have conversations together with our student athletes. And one of the things that does is it tells them we care about them. Because sometimes as coaches and athletic administrators, they don't think we care, but we wouldn't be in the business if we didn't care, right? And so I think as we move through these questions, just think about them and how you might be able to use them or modify them or make them available at your campus. So I'm not advancing. So I think the first thing we have to do is what resources are available on your campus. And one of the things that I'm going to say, and again, maybe it's because I've been an athletic trainer for 35 years, ask your athletic trainer. And if you don't have an athletic trainer, you better, in today's day and age, you better think about how we can get one. Your athletic trainer is going to be your best person to identify what resources that you have available on your campus. They'll work with your community campus center, your community health mental health resource center, all kinds of things. We even, at the university I used to work at, we implemented in our pre-participation physical exams a 4-minute mental health screening. So when the student does their physical, we add 4 minutes to the length of this physical. Ours is all done in stations. We have our arena and we go and we do orthopedic screening, we do cardiac screening, we do blood pressures and height and weight and all that kind of stuff. Now we do a 4-minute mental health screening. And in our 350 student athletes last year, we identified 12 that in this simple 4-minute process, we were able to statistically predict that they were suffering from a mental illness or would, over the course of that year, suffer from a mental illness. So what did we do with that information? The athletic trainer had a one-on-one with each of those 12 student athletes. And the overwhelming response from 10 of the 12 was, we had no idea that you knew. And we had no idea how much you care. And then what happened? Each of these kids, as they went through, and again, 22, 23-year-olds, young adults, I'm sorry, I always use the word kids, they went through a preliminary session with our on-campus counselor to determine what their risk level or assessment was. And at the end of the year, then we brought it back closed circuit, and we found all of them at the end of the year had either entered treatment, had gone on medication, or had resolved the issues related to their mental health. 4 minutes from an athletic trainer as part of your pre-participation physical exams. What resources use that person? I think the second question here is, who would you feel comfortable talking with if you had an issue of mental health? And I think this is the one thing that we see with coaches. They are they have such a unique relationship with their student athletes. Some of the student athletes will tell their coach anything, and some of the kids will tell their coach nothing. And that's okay. That's that coaching barrier and relationship. But what I've seen is that athletic directors, because they are such strong advocates for the student athletes, kind of naturally become the person that, in the absence of your athletic trainer, that they may feel comfortable in talking with. So think about maybe a different role than you maybe had ever perceived that you might have as an athletic director, and the role and importance or significance of being in that role. So as you think about the presentation today, what would it take on your campus? And I really appreciate, I saw a couple hands go up over here and a couple hands go up over there of campuses that feel like they're doing some pretty good things related to mental health. What I would encourage is during our break time today is to find those folks, ask them what it is they're doing, see what it is that they've got going, and share those resources. And I'll give you a slide in my next presentation on another person to contact directly about this for your conference that's doing some really good things. But as we talk about it, and then we identify resources, we can be proactive in developing strategies which help to lower the stigma. They help to make it healthy, I guess is the best way I'm saying, to talk about issues that are this complex and controversial. And again, the last question is, this is such a hard thing to do. It's just because it's so hard in our culture. And I think Victoria Garrett, I appreciate her honesty in talking about this and how difficult it was. And whether you could relate with her or not, you developed an empathy, I think, for her because of the complexity of the schedule that she keeps as a NCAA Division I volleyball player. Some of us say that, you know, we've created a culture where we have a lot of soft kids today. So what we need to do is toughen them up, you know, and I'm not sure where I stand on that. And I think, gosh, it's never been better for our student athletes. But I think those of us that think that way probably aren't going to be healthy or helpful in dealing with situations of our student athletes. We don't have to agree with where they're at. We just have to recognize where they're at. Does that make sense? Again, as I look around the room, there are some of you that are younger generation and some of you that are my generation. And again, when we recognize those generational differences on how we view things, it's going to help us to be able to better serve these kids. Again, it's somewhat dichotomous, and you know, it's the best it's ever been. Look at the resources they have. I mean, we got great shoes, we got all kinds of cool swag, and we got, you know, all this nice stuff. And yet our kids seem to be unhealthier than ever before. So what should you, and again, this presentation is often geared for an audience of student athletes, of coaches, and of athletic directors. What should you do if you suspect a teammate? So think of it from the student athlete's perspective. As an athletic director, if you have a coach that's dealing with this, and I understand that this is very real in our world today, and even in this conference, any conference, every conference. What is your role as the teammate, as the leader, as the coach, and in many cases as the employer? Again, having dealt with this as an employer, there is no easy solution here, but at least having conversations and taking a proactive process can be helpful. So again, Victoria talked about how it's easy to treat an ankle sprain. You can see the swelling, you can see the limping, you can see everything else. How come it's so hard to talk about mental illness? We can't see it. So how can we destigmatize it and bring it to a point where we can have healthy conversations? What strategies are there that we may be able to develop? So that's it for mental health, what's going on in their minds. Again, I hope you find that resource helpful. What we're finding is, again, literally thousands of student athletes in the NAIA are using this. Again, we would encourage you to use it in any way you feel appropriate. It's about the kids, and it's about getting the kids, the coaches, and the administrators in the same room and having this dialogue. And if you're not comfortable with this as the athletic directors, use your athletic trainers. Again, I'm an athletic trainer, so these folks are amazing in doing this, and they will be comfortable with this entire presentation. And if you don't have an athletic trainer, there are a lot of athletic trainers at our local high schools or areas around our region that would be more than happy to come in and to facilitate this type of conversation, as well as your school counselors and other people. So thanks, I appreciate your attention on this. We'll take a quick break if you need a cup of coffee or a glass of water. We'll start back in just about 5 minutes, and we're going to deal with another lighthearted topic, dealing with catastrophic injury or death. Two heavy hitters first thing in the morning. So again, appreciate your attention. Go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll get going here in just a second.